From kings and queens to President Vladimir Putin, America's commander-in-chief makes his way across Europe. What's next on his agenda? President Joe Biden still faces tough questions back home as U.S. bishops weigh what to do with Catholic politicians who support abortion. Life matters. Pro-life lawmakers sound the alarm about a Democratic bill to overrule states that protect unborn babies. And international investigation. A crackdown on drug dealers in the Philippines may have gone too far, why the country's president remains defiant. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, June 15th, 2021. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. Tonight, President Joe Biden is in Geneva, Switzerland, just hours away from holding a face-to-face meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The world will be watching as relations between the two nations have plummeted in the wake of recent cyber attacks on the U.S. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, for the last several days, President Biden has been meeting with European allies at the G7 and NATO summits, as well as today's U.S. and EU summit. And very soon, all the smiles and handshakes and elbow bumps and communiques will disappear when President Biden and President Putin sit down and cautiously size each other up.
Fresh off the U.S.-EU summit, President Joe Biden arrives in Geneva, Switzerland, where he'll meet one-on-one with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Cyber attacks, election interference, human rights abuses, all expected to come up in their conversation. Earlier today, President Biden standing before the cameras along with Belgium's king and prime minister.
Well, Mr. President, dear Joe, we are so pleased to welcome you in Brussels.
And more picture taking at the U.S.-EU summit, greeted by the European Council and European Commission presidents. President Biden told them he has a very different view than his predecessor did.
In America impact, we are committed. We have never fully left, but we're reasserting the fact that it's overwhelming the interest of the United States of America to have a great relationship with NATO and with the EU.
Warm welcomes aside, trade friction between the U.S. and EU remains over steel and aluminum import taxes put in place by President Donald Trump. But the two sides did announce a major breakthrough, a trade dispute involving Boeing and Airbus subsidies resolved. One official calling it a new chapter.
We move from litigation to cooperation on aircraft, and that after almost 20 years of disputes.
Now, today's summit ended with a joint statement saying allies will respond decisively to Russia for any harmful behavior overseas. In addition, President Biden has called Putin a worthy adversary, but is searching for areas of cooperation. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
On Capitol Hill, Republicans in both chambers are vowing to fight a piece of legislation called the Women's Health Protection Act. The bill was reintroduced by Democrats in an effort to protect access to abortion across the country. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports.
The Women's Health Protection Act was first introduced in 2013 and has been reintroduced in every congressional session since. But this year, pro-life lawmakers are concerned because of the makeup of both the House and the Senate being so close, and they vow to fight it.
They want to fund Planned Parenthood. They want to do everything they can to make abortions easier when most conservative states are making abortions much harder to get.
The Women's Health Protection Act, if passed, would guarantee the right for healthcare professionals to provide abortion care, even if Roe v. Wade was ever overturned. Specifically, it would prohibit state and federal lawmakers from imposing limits on abortion care, including mandatory ultrasounds, waiting periods, admitting privileges requirements, and limits on drug-induced abortions. The bill is led by Democratic Senators Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut and Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin, along with a similar bill in the House of Representatives. The renewed effort comes in the wake of the U.S. Supreme Court's decision last month to take up Mississippi's controversial ban on most abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy. Several other states have passed similar laws, like heartbeat bills that ban most abortions after a fetal heartbeat can be detected. Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal says these demagogic and draconian laws hurt women and families as they make personal and difficult medical decisions. Pro-life lawmaker Congressman Louis Gohmert disagrees and shared with me the time he spent with his first child, born 8 to 10 weeks premature.
The neonatologist told me, he said, talk to her. She can't see you, but she knows your voice. These children, they're too young to have eyes that work, but they respond. And when she held on to my finger for hours, I couldn't leave. I just couldn't leave. They know they want to live, and we ought to give them that chance.
Pro-life organizations say the fight continues, especially with the Biden administration strengthening abortion rights by omitting anti-abortion provisions from his recent budget proposal. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops is holding 3 days of virtual meetings starting tomorrow, and there is a lot on the agenda. The bishops are expected to discuss whether to continue an initiative on the importance of the Holy Communion in the life of the Church. That discussion could rebuke Catholic politicians like President Joe Biden, who are in favor of abortion. The virtual meeting is expected to include all 273 active U.S. bishops, archbishops, and cardinals. Joining us now is Matt Hadro, senior DC correspondent for EWTN's Catholic News Agency. Matt, welcome back. Always great to see you. So tell us more about this initiative and also why all the back and forth with the bishops.
So the proposed document is going to be a comprehensive look. It's going to be a teaching document on the Eucharist. And it's comprehensive in that it addresses a lot of different parts of church teaching. It addresses the importance of Sunday as a holy day, of recovering a sense of the Mass as a sacrifice, of recovering a sense of the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist, and as well as a section on general worthiness to receive communion among Catholics. It's been in discussion a lot recently because the issue has come into sharper focus during the Biden administration. You have a Catholic in the White House who espouses policies that are contrary to church teaching on the life issue, and the special working group that the U.S. bishops formed to deal with the incoming Biden administration did call for a teaching document on the Eucharist. But it's not just the Biden administration. There's been a sense among the bishops that there's a real need for catechesis for all Catholics on the Church's teaching on the Eucharist recently. Yeah, and Archbishop Jose Gomez, as we know, president of the USCCB, has said the discussion on communion will be on the agenda. Do we know, will that debate be public? Yes, it will. It will be as part of the deliberations of the conference. How it works is there's an action item, and the bishops are ultimately going to vote not on any final text of a document, but simply to begin drafting a document on the Eucharist. And before the vote, there's going to be deliberations. The bishops will discuss among themselves. So it's expected that individual bishops will be weighing in on communion. And what do you think will happen? Well, once the bishops vote to begin drafting the document, then the doctrine committee will go ahead with the drafting process, and there will be a lot of back and forth. It could possibly be ready by the fall meeting in November, where they would vote on a final text of a document. But again, the bishops have emphasized that there's a need for broader catechesis on the Eucharist. The document will be comprehensive. It's not going to be addressing any politicians by name, and it's going to talk about just general worthiness to receive communion among all Catholics. Yeah, and what else can we expect to be on the agenda? Well, the bishops will be considering a lot of other things. One of the things they'll be considering the causes of canonization, or voting to approve the causes of canonization of two figures, Father LaRue from the Diocese of Lafayette, Louisiana, and there was a captain of a merchant marine ship at the outset of the Korean War, who Father Leonard LaRue, who enacted a massive humanitarian rescue. And so those will be two figures that they'll be considering the causes of canonization for. They'll also be voting to move forward on pastoral statements on marriage ministry, on Native American ministry, as well as some liturgical translations for the breviary. So there's going to be a lot of other things that they're going to be considering. Yeah, and Matt, we have about probably 30 seconds left or so. What else should we know? Well, again, the there will be a lot that's talked about at this conference, but ultimately, especially regarding the issue of the Eucharist, a lot will depend on individual bishops issuing statements and teaching statements in their own dioceses. And we've already been seeing this from among certain bishops.
Well, Matt, thank you so much. We know you'll be following this all week long, so thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
A spokesman for the Filipino president says the ICC has no jurisdiction over its internal drug war. In 2016, Rodrigo Duterte pledged aggressive action. Now, international prosecutors are seeking criminal charges for several thousand alleged enforcement deaths in the Philippines. The Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem has visited a school badly damaged from recent Israeli airstrikes against Hamas in Gaza City.
We don't have bombs, but we have here, we learn here to talk, to think, and to write. And no one can stop this.
Archbishop Pierre Batista Pizzaballa began a pastoral visit yesterday, which will continue through Thursday in ministry to Gaza Strip Christians. In Germany, the historic Regensburg Cathedral will begin a new girls' choir in 2022. Its boys' choir, the Regensburg Cathedral Sparrows, dates its founding to 975 AD. Monsignor Georg Ratzinger, the late brother of Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI, was a former director. Coming up, the rising number of abortions in England, why unborn babies with Down syndrome are particularly vulnerable. And Supreme Court case. Learn about the importance of a Mississippi law and how it could challenge Roe versus Wade. England and Wales report a record high number of abortions last year. The two nations charted almost 211,000 abortions, surpassing 2019 by more than 1,300. A pro-life group cites pandemic-permitted medical abortions at home during the first 10 weeks of pregnancy. Nearly 700 were due to a Down syndrome diagnosis. Abortion advocates want a federal injunction against Arkansas's new pro-life law due to take effect July 28th. Planned Parenthood and the ACLU oppose the penalty, making abortion a felony except in an emergency. Federal appeals court blocked Missouri's pro-life law last week. Well, the Supreme Court is set to hear arguments this fall on a case which could dramatically affect abortion in the United States. The court will hear a case involving the state of Mississippi, which is seeking to enforce its ban on abortion after 15 weeks. A decision favorable to the state could lay the groundwork for allowing more restrictions on abortion. Several states are seeking to ban abortion once a baby's heartbeat is detected, which is typically after 6 weeks. And joining us now is Robert George, McCormick Professor of Juris-Prudence and Director of the James Madison Program in American Ideals and Institutions at Princeton University. Professor George, welcome back. Always great to be with you. Tell us more about this case, Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health Organization, and why it's so important for the pro-life movement.
Well, this is the big one. We've had a so-called constitutional right to abortion since 1973, when the Supreme Court handed down its misbegotten ruling in Roe against Wade, holding that there was a national right to abortion, despite the fact that there's nothing like that in the text or logic or structure or original understanding of the Constitution. But we've lived with that constitutional and moral abomination for all these decades. Well, now, because of the law in Mississippi forbidding abortion, passed by the legislature, forbidding abortion after 15 weeks of gestation, that is, forbidding elective abortions, abortions that are not required to preserve the health or save the life of the mother. We have a test case, and the Supreme Court has taken the case. That means the Supreme Court's going to consider whether finally to reverse Roe versus Wade and to send the question of abortion back to the legislatures. Most people are predicting that the law will be upheld, and that's a good thing. Certainly from the pro-life point of view, that's a good thing. The justices on the court look poised to uphold it. The real question is, will they take this golden opportunity to put Roe versus Wade on the ash heap of history where it belongs? I hope and pray that they will do that, Tracy.
Yeah, and you mentioned that, and some say this could be the beginning of the end of Roe versus Wade. Could you explain to us why that is and why that could indeed be the case?
Yes, it's because Roe versus Wade establishes a constitutional right to abortion up to the point of viability. It's actually even more radical than that, but I won't go into the nuances and details. But 15 weeks is before the point of viability, the point at which the child can survive, even if with assistance outside the mother's womb. So this is a direct challenge to Roe versus Wade. And the legislature of Mississippi knew that it was challenging Roe in enacting this legislation. So it's going to be difficult to do what the justices seem like they're going to do, which is to uphold that law without addressing the question of Roe versus Wade and reversing that decision.
Well, we know you'll be following that, as will we. Earlier, Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reported that Democrats are reintroducing the Women's Health Protection Act to try and enshrine abortion rights regardless of changes at the state level. I'd like to get your thoughts on that, and if it were to pass, the impact.
Shame on the Democrats. Shame on their disrespect for the sanctity of human life in all stages and conditions. When I was a young boy growing up in West Virginia with my grandfathers who were coal miners and union men, and of course Democrats stood for the little guy. Democrats stood for the weak and the vulnerable. Well, here they have turned their back on the littlest guy of all, the weakest and most vulnerable member of the human family. They wish to expose children, let's be clear, up to birth. With the violence, the lethal violence of abortion. I hope they can be prevented from doing that in the United States Congress.
I'm going to switch gears just a little bit here. As you know, churches across the United States are reopening following the pandemic. Can we talk about the importance of attending Mass in person rather than virtually?
Yes. That's right. Well, I'm very glad that finally churches are reopening. I'm glad that bishops are lifting the dispensation from the obligation to attend Sunday Mass. Remember, we need to be there with our Lord in person. He's there at Mass in person in the Eucharist, body, blood, soul, and divinity. We need to be there in person if we possibly can be. Now, it was a blessing when we couldn't be, that at least we could access Mass online, and many people took advantage of that, which was wonderful. But that is only a fifth best solution. The first best solution, and what our obligation is to be there in person with our Lord, to receive him bodily in the Eucharist. It's an amazing thing that he makes himself available to us, body and blood, in the Holy Eucharist. Well, we mustn't turn down that invitation or miss the opportunity to receive him in his fullness.
Robbie, thank you so much for your time today. We always appreciate it. Robert George McCormick, Professor of Juris-Prudence and Director of the James Madison Program in American Ideals and Institutions at Princeton University. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Up next, protecting the Eucharist. The new head of the Knights of Columbus shares one of his top priorities. And our colleague in Rome reflects on his years covering the Vatican. Before we let Alan Holdren go, we ask what stories stood out. Patrick Kelly is the new Supreme Knight of the Knights of Columbus, and he is consecrating his administration to St. Joseph with an emphasis on reverence for the Eucharist.
We know that Jesus Christ is really truly present, body, blood, soul, and divinity in the Blessed Sacrament. Committed to our principle of unity, let us strive to serve Christ in the Eucharist.
Patrick Kelly was officially installed last Friday. He succeeds Carl Anderson, who served as Supreme Knight from 2000 to 2021. Well, as we reported earlier, President Joe Biden is in Europe, and there had been talk that he would meet with Pope Francis. However, today, there are new developments in that story. Joining us from Rome is Alan Holdren, EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief. Great to see you, Alan. President Biden is in Europe at the moment, and there had been talk that he would meet with Pope Francis at the Vatican. Do we know, will that meeting still take place?
It doesn't look to be the case today, Tracy. The idea was that he could potentially stop through between Brussels, Belgium, and Geneva, Switzerland, just a quick stop through to see Pope Francis. But we haven't received any confirmation that that has indeed taken place, and so it looks like it's not going to happen this time around.
Alan, do we know if the White House reached out to Vatican officials about a possible meeting?
That's what sources from the Vatican's Apostolic Palace and also the Secretariat of State told Catholic News Agency that it was being studied, and so we can assume that there was some sort of a request that came from Biden's administration, but it looks like it didn't pan out in the end.
I want to switch gears here for a minute, sort of on a personal note. Today's your last day with EWTN. It's really been quite the journey. Can you talk to us about your time here at EWTN?
Yeah, well, I've been here since 2009 in Rome, and I started as Catholic News Agency's correspondent. And then I worked up through producing the Vaticano program, being EWTN News Nightly's first correspondent when it started back in 2013, and really just having the great honor and blessing of building this amazing Vatican Bureau. And helping to collaborate with all of the different EWTN offices throughout the world and all the different programs, including EWTN News Nightly with you, Tracy. It really has been a blessing, and that's been the path of the last 11 and a half years of my life and my wife's life, and now our 4 kids that were all born here in Rome.
Well, listen, Alan, it's been a blessing really working with you, and I know that everyone else feels the same way. Can you talk about maybe some of the highlights while you're here? I mean, you worked here for more than a decade.
Yeah, it's funny to think about because I feel like the time just went by so fast because there's always so much going on here in Rome. We've had the canonization of John Paul II, John the 23rd, Cardinal John Henry Newman, Mother Teresa. We had a conclave in 2013. We've had synod coverage that's been live from this very square just outside St. Peter's Square. Think about the papal trips to far-flung places that I would have never imagined that I'd ever go to. Places like Azerbaijan and the Philippines, Sri Lanka. It really, all of those have been highlights, but I think probably the biggest highlight of all has been just working with people here day to day, building relationships with colleagues and with people that serve the church in so many different ways and often pass through Rome where we have the pleasure of meeting them.
You know, you mentioned your beautiful family. Can you talk a little bit more about what's next for all of you and also, you know, what else you're going to miss about Rome?
Yeah, Tracy, so we're moving to the little town of Beloit, Kansas, where St. John's Catholic Church has St. John's Catholic School. And so I'm going to be taking up a teaching position there, teaching audiovisual communications and small business management and entrepreneurship, as well as English classes. It's a small school, it's a beautiful school, it's a beautiful community, and we're really excited to be a part of it. I've got family that lives there, and so it's a very natural fit. Some of the things that I'll be missing about Rome are, you know, St. Peter's Basilica here behind me. Make a point of going in as often as possible, celebrating Mass there, staying close to the sacraments here that is so important to our work in journalism as Catholics. And I think that'll be my biggest the biggest thing that I'll miss is just the day-to-day living and working in Rome. And I'm sure we'll be back one day.
Yeah, well, we're certainly going to miss you. Before I let you go, Alan, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us before we end our conversation?
Just that it's, again, it's been a great blessing, and thank you to you, Tracy, to Matthew Bunson, Rodney Harris there at EWTN News Nightly, the whole crew, Leon, Stefano. I don't want to leave anybody out, so I'll just say everybody there, it really has been an honor. And I hope that one day we'll meet again there in Washington, D.C. or in Beloit. I keep promising people, if you come to Kansas City, I'll come and pick you up.
I've never been to Kansas, and I'm looking forward to it. And Alan, honestly, it's been such a blessing working with you, and all of us feel the same way. Thank you for all that you've done for our newscast and for the network. And again, we're certainly going to miss you. God bless you and your family. It's been an honor.
Thank you, Tracy, and thanks to all the viewers as well.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.